The
Nice.
fall
It's fall.
is like hospice to me. It's like
Oh
the
my
hospice.
goodness.
It's like the tree hospice. I know people aren't gonna like that, but it is just watching things die for me. I really struggle with it. I don't know what it is. I'll get therapy, I promise, at one point.
This is On Call.
Wow, this would be really cool to just wear scrubs all the time. Then you don't have to think about what you're gonna wear to work.
Joke is awesome. We're here to answer your questions.
We can sit down and discuss them. Wait, I gotta go. I'm on call.
Wait, you're on call? I thought I was on call.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of On Call with April and Alicia. I'm April.
I'm Alicia.
And I'm Roberta.
Hey,
We have a guest.
We have a new guest in the call room. Welcome, Roberta.
It's nice to be here.
So Roberta is Roberta's Dr. Roberta Luskin-Hawk. She is one of our chief medical officers for our East region here at Sound. So we're excited to have you today, Roberta.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We can't wait to tell you guys all about Roberta, by the way, but we're going to have to wait for just a little bit.
Sounds good.
April,
Yes,
how are you?
I'm good.
What's new?
What's new? Not much. Sports are back in full swing. So
Kids are back in school?
Kids are back in school. We're back
Nice.
to soccer and softball.
You know what my question is?
I have no idea.
How's the weather?
It's actually beautiful today. We're like 70s, breezy, sunny. Took a nice walk during my break from my calls today. It was good.
Well, sadly, I've got no hurricanes to report for anybody today, but we're the same. I think we had a little cool down here in the city, and then it got hot again. So I think as I'm looking right now, we're about 98 degrees. So nice and hot. But I'd take that any day over snow. So can't complain. Roberta, tell us where you are.
I'm in Chicago, where it's a beautiful, sunny 68 degrees here today. It cooled off a little bit. It's kind of a crisp, early fall day, so very pretty.
April, do you love how I make everybody report on their weather?
Yeah. Do you also like how everybody except for you likes the fall?
Yeah, I
Alicia
do.
hates the fall, and I love fall.
Roberta, I always say the
nice.
fall
It's fall.
is like hospice to me. It's like
Oh
the
my
hospice.
goodness.
It's like the tree hospice. I know people aren't going to like that, but it is just watching things die for me. I really struggle with it. I don't know what it is. I'll get therapy, I promise, at one point. But yes, everyone loves the weather when it gets cooler, and it makes me very sad. So we'll get there.
Oh,
Don't worry.
We'll take care of you, Alicia. No worries.
Yes.
She'll be fine. She'll get through it.
Right. Well, like normally we spend a lot more time talking about all of the wild escapades either April has had with critters or what did you say, rattlesnakes on one of our last episodes, or weather issues or Roomba issues for me. But with having Roberta here, I think we really wanted to stick on stay on target. So April, what do you think about just moving into let's break the ice now so we can move into our content for today?
That sounds good. So Roberta,
Okay.
every time we have a guest, we do a segment called Let's Break the Ice, where we're going to ask you a couple random questions, just like a fun sort of get to know you a little bit for our listeners and for us, because it's stuff we don't know about you.
Okay.
So I'll start. I usually often start with something about food, so I will keep that tradition today. So what is your favorite topping to have on pizza? Hopefully you like
Ooh.
pizza.
So you'll find it's hard for me to give a single answer because while I actually love a good cheese pizza. I recently had one with prosciutto, figs, and balsamic
Ooh.
vinegar, which was amazing.
Oh.
So
Did you say
Okay.
figs?
yes,
Ooh, so sweet
So-
and salty, huh?
yeah. It was. There's a new place near me that got good write-ups, and so actually it was during a budget meeting we got out and we decided to they called it their Cali something pizza, so we decided to try it. It was good.
It was good.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
April, what's your favorite topping on a pizza?
I like pepperoni. I'm a
Basic.
boring, basic girl.
Vanilla. Okay. All
And
right.
Alicia, what do you like? We have
What's
to
my
find out.
favorite? Probably banana pepper or jalapeno.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, definitely cheese. Like if we're assuming cheese, sauce, and everything else is is basic. Yeah.
Yeah, everything
I-
else is
I-
standard.
Something with a little spice. I like a little spice. Okay, Roberta, I've got one for you. Um, what's the most interesting place that you've traveled to with your work, whether it's for work or for research in your career?
Or for fun, or just work or research?
Yes. Well, work, research, fun. What's the most interesting place?
Oh. Yes, Sardinia was interesting. So I was in the Mediterranean, and Sardinia is this place where it's called a blue zone. So people, an enormous number of people live, beyond 100, and it seems to be some combination of kind of a laid back lifestyle, a diet that's plant-based with lots of fish, a more typical Mediterranean diet, and maybe a few other things. So that was just kind of an interesting snapshot of a beautiful place, but also maybe it told us something about longevity. One place.
Okay.
But I love to
Blue
travel.
zone. So is
1,000.
Costa Rica like a blue zone? I think maybe I've heard that term maybe one other time. So blue zones are where they live.
To be more than 100. I don't know if Costa Rica is. They're scattered around the world.
Okay.
Sometimes they say that they've had a famine, like there's, that actually some starvation followed by this healthy stuff is helpful. But and I don't know that much about it, but that was kind of an interesting fact. But I mean, I love to travel absolutely anywhere, see new cultures, eat new food, meet people. It's fun.
And you just recently went on a trip, correct?
Yeah, I was in Greece, so that was I went to a bunch of different Greek isles, and yeah, I kind of have a work hard, play hard philosophy. So at work I'm
Love
pretty
that.
intense,
I
and
love
then
that.
then I need to leave and do something, keeps me busy, but totally different.
I'm gonna grow up and be Roberta, April,
Okay.
one day and live that life. Okay,
Sounds
your
like she's a
turn.
lot of fun, so that makes
I
sense.
know. We need to hang on with Roberta a little bit more.
There you
I
go.
know. All right, my next question is, what is your favorite season? We're in fall now, so what's your favorite season of the year and why?
I still like summer. I think because being from
too.
Chicago, I enjoy four seasons, but the winters can be really tough and gray.
Yeah.
The gray's worse than the cold. But there's something about the vibrancy of summer where people the city comes alive. There's music festivals and people, on the lakefront and sailboats and people riding their bikes. And so I think that energy, as well as I love warm weather and being near water, that combination does it for me.
Okay, makes sense.
I feel like that way with the spring when it starts getting really green and it feels like birth and life, and I love it. I'm with you, Roberta. Maybe a little more spring to summer, but I love that. April, what's your favorite season? Fall.
I don't know. I really like the fall.
You like
But the
Oscar.
spring is like my time, right? It's April, it's my
Yeah.
birthday. So I don't know.
Your
Fall and
name.
spring are kind of tied for me, actually.
Okay. Okay. All right, Roberta, my last question for you. If you could describe your current job as Chief Medical Officer for East Division for Sound Physicians, if you could describe that job in 3 words, what would that be?
Relationships,
Okay.
excellence, and growth.
All right.
Oh, I like that. Okay, well, that was a lot of fun. Roberta, we love Break the Ice. I talk about the Weather Channel all the time. And recently, April and I have been talking about like a lot of the commercials that have been popping up. And one of the things that I recently saw was actually HIV, AIDS related medications that have actually kind of popped up in this setting. And one thing I learned is that National Latinx AIDS Awareness Day is October 15th of this year. And this day was really chosen to coincide with the last day of Hispanic Heritage Month. It's a theme. There's really been some issues, I think, for a lot of the migration of the Latin population that's moved into America, that have completed like less formal education. They have maybe limited English proficiency. They've maybe been at a particular disadvantage when it comes to accessing like HIV testing or prevention, or even really understanding it. And as a result, these communities are disproportionately affected by HIV. and some of the last studies that I saw when I looked it up briefly was that the Hispanic and Latino individuals did account for like 29% of new HIV diagnosis in the US, despite them only making up 18.5% of the total population. So that really caught my attention. In addition to that, if we move into like November, December, there's additional like AIDS awareness days. And what many of you may not know is Roberta, who comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and one of our, most fabulous CMOs for our region. Her background is actually in infectious disease, and April and I thought it would be a really great opportunity to kind of lean into her in honor of this Latinx AIDS awareness and AIDS and HIV awareness day, and also like what we're moving into in the next couple of months, and really maybe tap into her insight, what her experience has been there, and generally in infectious disease. So Roberta, thank you, first of all, for joining us. And I would love for you to give us a little story about you. Tell us what's Roberta's story? What's either your sound story, your personal story? What would you want the listeners to know about you?
Sure. Well, it's a long story, so I'll try to give some highlights. But in terms of my my personal and career story, I've really been blessed by, a fabulously rewarding career surrounded by wonderful people where I've been given a chance to make a difference. And I think one of the themes is I find myself liking to jump in where I can make things better or change things. And decided I wanted to be a physician in high school, kind of stuck by that, became an ID doc where I saw patients, I taught residents, I did clinical research. Every time there was a new issue to be addressed, I like to jump in and try to solve it. Pivoted in my career, and my research was largely in HIV, and we can chat about that. And it really was part of an amazing group of people that kind of wrapped their rounds around what was an overwhelming epidemic at the time, and this trying to grapple with the science and the research and get answers, which was cool. And then along the way, I became more of an administrator, running hospitals and developing programs to reach out to communities to make a difference with the care we provided. And then came to sound, and really it was a great connection with sound. Travis Sewells, who was my chief medical officer in California, was coming to sound, and I was his reference. And I started learning more about sound and the opportunities here, and had wanted to do something where I could continue to help transform care and make a difference, help communities do better and get better care. And was really very honored to be given this opportunity and work with such amazing people.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Hey, Roberta, when did you start in ID, in infectious disease?
In 1985. So I finished my fellowship in infectious diseases in 1985. And just to give some framing of that, HIV or AIDS as a syndrome was described in 81. The HIV virus was identified in 83. We basically had no treatments. AZT didn't come out until 87. So I walked in, actually, when I went into infectious disease, I really went into it because I loved curing people. Like you'd go in and figure out someone had meningitis or pneumonia or malaria and you could cure them. But lo and behold, I ended up entering the field when there was this huge epidemic that was not very well understood and made people very afraid, and had a, obviously, huge cost to our society and the individuals it impacted. So it was not what I expected in my career, but I had an opportunity to make a difference, certainly.
That's an amazing perspective, because obviously April and I probably entered in beyond that, and there were still, concerns about HIV, AIDS, but to be in the thick of it in the beginning, I'm very excited to talk to you about some of this and what your experience was. So thank you for sharing that, April.
Yeah, I'm excited too to hear more about this. So tell us, to start off, Roberta, tell us about the most common infectious diseases you treated when you practiced and how they've evolved over time.
The most common. I mean, certainly I treated a lot of sepsis, pneumonia, just typical bacterial infections was the bread and butter of what I did. And that evolution, I think it hasn't evolved that much. There's some new antibiotics. I think for all of our hospitalists and emergency medicine and critical care colleagues, so that what's amazing is that we were looking for best practices to treat sepsis and getting people to adhere 20 years ago with the Surviving Sepsis campaign. And we're still talking about
the same things. Yeah.
some of the same things
Right?
today. So that part is pretty consistent. Other parts of infectious disease like HIV changed dramatically during the same time period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about that, Roberta, not just HIV/AIDS, but whether the beginning, mid, what were some of the challenges you faced in diagnosing and treating more of the rare or emerging infectious diseases at that time?
Well, I mean, I think in the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, we didn't even know what caused it, which was amazing. And once we knew that, we had to deal with all the fear among caregivers, all the stigma with the patients. I remember having a 77-year-old grandma who had gotten a blood transfusion who was just horrified, like, how am I going to tell my family? But there were people from, I saw people from all walks of life, so that there was a huge emotional component. And then along the way, I think that what was different was that, the patients, because they were so vulnerable, based on their own health, their relationships with others, we became very close. And so I developed these amazing relationships, which was both the blessing and the hardship, because you would lose people who you got very close to.
Yeah, especially at that time. Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? Ryan White. That I was younger, but he was really one of the first, I think, cases that had come, at least in the media. And I believe he had received either a transfusion or had received something where he was a very young child that was marked with that. And it was one of the first conversations I was having with my family as a young kid, like, what is this? And like, even the fear, don't get near if you touch anyone, if you, if you come in contact with them, you could catch, like, there was a ton of like fear in the 80s and 90s around that. But the Ryan White he was my age. It made me think like, well, he wasn't in this risky behavior category that we had heard, about prior to that. So that's interesting.
Yeah. He had hemophilia, but ended up.
Was he blood transfusion, right?
Yeah, he was factor VIII, so it was a clotting factor that he needed. And a lot of hemophilics at the time ended up with the same situation. But then, there's the Ryan White Act named after him is what helped get so many people badly needed medications. So at least his memory was memorialized in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've already talked a little bit, Roberta, about when HIV and AIDS were initially just discovered, but tell us a little bit about what it looked like in the 1980s, and then the impact that clinical trials had over time, in approaching changes in the care, and how did that really change over the next 20 to 30 years, the care of these patients?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think with, in the 80s, we were very much learning, and the science was evolving quickly. And then we had to figure out what we could do with medications. And so, part of what I had the opportunity to do was found a clinical research consortium as part of the National Institute of Health to do clinical trials. And what was interesting about it was that our particular groups were asked to do something that wasn't happening, which was to do outreach so that we were inclusive of women and people of color and people with a history of substance use disorder, so that the science ended up reflecting that broader population that was impacted. But also what was interesting is sometimes to get into a clinical trial could be life-saving for someone. So I have people alive today, they're my friends on Facebook who are alive because they were able to get things. I know. Yeah, it's very cool. But what we saw is, we people around the country worked together to enroll patients in clinical trials. And in our setting, we had research nurses who spoke to people where they got care to make them more comfortable, and, tried for single drugs, combination drugs. And we started to see we made a small difference. And it was really the early 90s. And by 1995, where we had cocktails that included protease inhibitors. And we went from an AIDS unit full of patients, many of them dying, to emptying it out, which was, just this
That's really cool, too.
transformational moment.
Yeah.
And where people started living normal lifespans with a chronic disease. Now, some of those early drugs had more side effects, so then the drugs have been evolved further so that they're easier to tolerate. Then they evolved further so that some of them are longer acting or could be given by injection because compliance is so important. But that pivot from the 80s, where I was losing patients every week, to literally emptying out inpatient AIDS units was an amazing thing. And so it was it's kind of a privilege to be part of that and to see that happen. But it's seeing science at its best is when, scientists come together and, this was all under Anthony Fauci and the NIH, where we had some brilliant minds coming together, designing trials, evaluating, doing that constant incremental learning that got us to the right answers.
Yeah, that's amazing just to be able to see the impact you're having like real time like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, especially that feels quickly. It probably didn't feel quickly for you. So my father's Congolese, and there's obviously in Africa there's still quite an epidemic of HIV/AIDS there. How did the U.S. impact HIV or AIDS in Africa from your perspective?
It's a really important story because there was a time under one of the President Bushes with the NIH and Dr. Fauci where they went to the pharmaceutical companies and basically got the pharmaceutical companies to agree to generic manufacturing of combination HIV therapy to be delivered to patients in Africa. And it's thought that about 13 million people were saved because of that decision and the support for that decision, because there was really there was no way that the African countries, for the most part, could afford the price of the more expensive versions, and it was essential to get drugs out to millions of people. But that was a transformational moment. I had friends who went out and did work in Africa in some of the clinics to try to understand, testing and getting people drugs and really communication and culture and education to try to get people to accept it. But you could get them to accept it, and if you couldn't deliver the drug, you still couldn't do it. So that was a big deal, and the U.S. made a difference.
Wow.
That's awesome to hear about, how not only the U.S. we're making an impact, but really other countries as well. So I think in healthcare in general, we always talk about prevention, right? And how can we prevent illnesses? And also with our patients, I know I'm always preaching, take the medications we give you, adhere to your treatment. So can you talk a little bit about, in terms of HIV/AIDS, really the importance of that prevention piece, as well as adhering to the treatment for those that are on treatment?
Yeah, it's super important. We're at the point now where with PrEP, the preventative options that people can take, men and women who are at some risk of HIV can be on a daily medication, and even if they're exposed, they can stay uninfected. But what that takes is important. You have to accept that you're engaging in an activity that could put you at risk, or with a partner who could put you at risk. And that, we all live with a lot of denial. So, having people being willing to say, look, at my lifestyle is such that I can't be sure about my partner. And I think women are particularly vulnerable to this. I think gay men are much better, that it's okay, we understand that this may be something we're going to be grappling with. Let's just take the medicine and protect ourselves. If you see on TV, there's often the ads also highlighting women who might be at risk. And I think women have historically, been less likely to take a preventive measure, whether it's because they don't believe their partner, maybe bringing risk into their relationship, or it's denial is a powerful thing, but it can make a huge difference. And there's a big initiative to try to dramatically reduce the number of new HIV infections by 2030, and adequate prevention is certainly part of it. Adherence is also super important once you're on HIV meds. If you don't take them regularly or as prescribed, you can end up with resistant virus that then can grow and start impacting your immune system. But and not only that, you can spread that resistant virus to other people. So we try to do a lot of education about adherence for people who are on treatment. And as drugs are developed, there's a lot of focus on what can we do in terms of long-acting drugs, injectable drugs, other things that can help people be compliant. Because as we know, I mean, most of us, if you've had a strep throat and you had to take penicillin for 10 days, like how many of us end up at the end of the 10 days and there's not like one little penicillin sitting in that bottle and you're going like,
we hoard them, Roberta. We need them for future infections.
Yeah.
Do you know
like,
that?
How did I goof
Well, I
this
always
up?
end up taking it for like 11 or 12 because I missed a couple of doses in that 10.
So you can imagine when you're asking people to be compliant for months and years, so I think that, we as a healthcare, industry are have an obligation also to see what can we do to make that easier, because it's a big ask.
Yeah.
I think what's impressive to me is growing up in between what feels like in between two worlds of HIV AIDS. It was just a death sentence in the earlier part of my life. And now to see people living and functioning and living like full lives with like HIV is like it's incredible to me. It has to be even more so to you, just having been on the front lines during those times, that kind of even wondering if you were ever going to get out of that, Yeah,
I mean, it gives you hope that science can make such an impact, right? It really is amazing.
All right. So you mentioned a little bit, Roberta, about the goal of eradication by 2030. So can you talk a little bit more about that and tell us what's the thought behind there?
Yeah, and I just know a little bit about it. Obviously, my career has pivoted where I'm not the expert on HIV anymore, but the UN is looking to make a dramatic impact on HIV and AIDS as we know it by 2030, and they call it HIV eradication. It's not an elimination of HIV in general, but what they are hoping to achieve are 0 new HIV infections by 2030. In the year 2030, which would be an amazing thing.
That'd be amazing.
0 discrimination related to HIV. So it's a societal goal as well as an infection goal. And 0 AIDS related deaths for those people who are already infected, to have treatments and support so that we don't see people dying. And so that is an aspirational goal. But I think that the idea is, if we could drop new HIV infections by 75% by 2025 and then drop them by 90% by 2030, that's a goal to get to.
That's a great goal.
Yeah,
I like
right.
That. Especially like existing through this lifespan of this entire disease process. I'm going to pivot just a little bit, Roberta. I know we're doing this in honor of Latinx AIDS and HIV awareness, but it's impressive to me that you began your work at the beginning of this and you kind of get to see the fruits of your labor at the end of it. My question for you though is, we're going back to the C word, COVID. What did that pandemic teach you? Besides, you've experienced this with AIDS, HIV, or HIV AIDS, excuse me, but what did the COVID-19 pandemic teach all of us, or teach you even, about the risk of evolution of new infectious diseases and really the need for public health infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, sometimes when we study evolution, we kind of think, we've evolved, like we're here, we're done, like it's over. And the, viruses and bacteria obviously continue to evolve, and they're going to be threats out there. I think that with COVID, what was highlighted was the lack of public health infrastructure, that we were caught after much of the support for public health had really dropped. And so, and it was similarly, people are struggling now and then with just access to primary care. So it was twofold. It was, we didn't have, I think when public health went away, there was a thought, well, there's this other healthcare system and people have primary care docs and we don't need this public health thing. But it was both, that we didn't have enough public health infrastructure, and access to primary care was and continues to be challenging. So I just think as a country, many countries around the world have very solid public health infrastructure. The United States still has some challenges in that regard.
Yeah. And I guess then my follow-up to that is, doing what you do, how do you stay optimistic? How do you stay motivated to continue working through this against some of these challenges? It seems challenging for me. How is that for you?
Well, I mean, for the good news is I'm wired optimistic by nature. So I am a
Okay.
glass half full person, which is a good starting point. But while, and while I was facing the hardest part of losing patients to HIV, I had cherished relationships with patients. I had amazing relationships with colleagues. The people around me were inspiring. The science was evolving. And I started to see those incremental improvements. And I think that's relevant to all the work we do, is that sometimes when we have a big problem to solve, if you look at the whole thing, it just feels too big, and then you figure out, how do you take bites out of the elephant, but how do you do incremental improvements? And I think you have to keep hope. I'm hopeful and optimistic by nature, but the fact that I've seen HIV go from a death sentence to a chronic disease people can live with, the fact that I've seen COVID go from killing people, horribly, to the impact of vaccines and other things that we do.
Right.
I think I've seen the best of what science can offer, and so it reconfirms my bias that is optimistic by nature.
We need more Robertas in the world for sure.
We do. It is hard. I mean, seeing it happen is awesome, and I think, imagine that really motivated everybody, but it is hard some days to remember that. So.
Yeah,
Oh, and
absolutely.
I mean, in the midst of it, there were days that were crushing. I probably ended up as an administrator because the emotional impact of losing patient after patient, I pulled back from clinical work. So yeah, I don't want to whitewash what was so hard. I think I think it wiped me out emotionally to a great extent. I mean, I literally remember a time watching the movie E.T., and E.T. was coded. And I remember during the code, like I was like almost tearful, and it was like, because because you couldn't respond when you're dealing with patients. You guys live through this, you got to pull it all together. But I'm watching ET getting coded, and it's like I could finally get emotional because now there was like a safe space. So yeah, I don't mean to minimize in our work, as clinicians, there are those tough days.
Yeah.
Well, I think April and I did a podcast episode on, there was I think it was a two-parter, and it was largely on like difficult conversations, difficult experiences, kind of processing through what we go through as healthcare providers. And again, I always say the C word because that's our most recent frame of reference. But I can't say that I didn't agree to move into a more administrative space because I wasn't burned out from just even, and that was 2 years. I can't imagine like the time you spent under the HIV/AIDS umbrella and that loss, the 2 years and that impact from COVID for me, it like wrecked me. And in the middle of it, like I always say, like I've said to April, it's like reptilian. You kind of just get through it when you get through it, but then when you step away from it, those emotions aren't gone. You process every patient, you process every loss. All of it does come out at some point, and it is challenging. So I appreciate your ability to stay optimistic through that, because I think it's easy to burn out and step away.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, having a good team. I know you mentioned, just everybody pulling together. I mean, I remember there was a day in COVID, it had been a long, long day, a hard day. And there was like 3 or 4 of us in the office. And one of us said something really like silly, and all of us just like busted out laughing, and we laughed so hard. And I think it was just, like if we didn't laugh, we were going to cry. And it was like all that emotion coming out, because it would just, there was just so much going on. So.
And sometimes I think people forget we're human. On the back end, these are human beings taking care of human beings. And I just salute you, Roberta, for what you've done, even just paving the way to make it.
But I think to both of your points, though, it's so important for us as leaders to remember that all of our folks on the front line are grappling with these emotions day in and day out, and how we can support them.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's not limited to COVID or, some infectious disease. This is just, life.
Everyday life.
That we're managing. Yeah, I agreed fully.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, Roberta, what advice do you have for medical students or early career professionals that are thinking about a specialty in infectious disease?
I think whatever you pick, just, make sure you love what you do.
Yeah.
That you,
Yeah.
that you feel like you make a difference, that it fills your soul. All this work is hard. And so whatever career or specialty, I think it's really just finding something that resonates with you.
So Roberta, before we, wrap this up, first of all, thank you. But are there any other, I don't know, closing thoughts, closing remarks that you have that you'd like to share?
No, just, I think it's one of gratitude, which I think is the other piece of
Mm.
resilience. I'm grateful to be part of Sound Physicians. I love the people I work with. It's fun to share our stories. We all come to this work from different places. And yeah, I hope, I hope there's something about the story that intrigues someone and makes an impact. So thanks for letting me share.
I would love to have you on more and more times. April knows I'm an infectious disease nerd. I think Roberta, I've told you this a million times over. I'd keep you on and we could talk about all kinds of random diseases. But for purposes of this podcast, thank you. Anybody in our listening audience that has any questions or any, feedback from this show, please feel free to reach out to us. We have our social media. We're on LinkedIn. We're pretty much everywhere. Our Instagram handle is @OnCall with April and Alicia. If you want to send us an email, some feedback, some questions, please feel free to email us at oncallpodcast@soundphysicians.com. And we would be happy to return those comments, questions, concerns, anything that you've got. So, April.
Until next time, you guys stay well and we'll stay on call. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.